And we are recording. And welcome
Excellent.
to you, Elaine. And thank you for joining me in this interview slash conversation around the subject of weight loss.
Thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, no problem. And as I said before we recorded, but I want to say it again, is I don't have a lot of insights into the subject of weight loss. So I reached out in the community, the 3P community, to hear who knows anything about this and who works in this field. And you were one of the people who reached out to me out of many, and I feel humbled. So let's start from the beginning. How did you're working with people who want to lose weight, right?
hmm
And how did you come about that?
Well, I used to work, as a lot of people in this field. I was an NLP practitioner and hypnotherapist.
Yeah.
And I did something called Hypnoband, which was like the virtual gastric band. And it was clear to me then that it was nothing to do with weight. It was to do with the way people thought about weight. So when I was introduced to the principles in 2009, it just made absolute sense to me that this was what was missing for my weight loss clients, because everyone that comes to me back then and still now have been on every diet that you can think of, and they often say that I'm kind of last chance saloon because they've just tried everything else. And in many cases they've had so many diets, they've had so many diet sheets, and this is the way you should eat, that they actually can't even remember what they really like, what their body wants, because they've forgotten what they like because they've just followed a diet sheet. Now we know as well that if you follow a diet sheet, and I often say, it always starts on Monday morning, doesn't it? So everybody always eats everything they can at the weekend because they're never going to eat that again. It's the never again food. And then they start on Monday morning and they buy all the correct things, and they start, and then things happen. Maybe they've not prepared properly, or suddenly they're late home from work, or they have to go out and it goes awry. And then once it goes awry, people think, oh no, I'll have to start again tomorrow or next Monday. And this continues. Or they stick to it rigidly. They really stick to this diet sheet, and they do exactly what the diet sheet tells them. But of course, that doesn't actually address the way they think about food. So if somebody really likes a foot-long baguette for lunch filled with whatever they like, they still think they like that. So as soon as they finish the diet, they go back to what they think they like. And then obviously the pounds go back on and more. Or they start to feel deprived because they still think they like that certain food, the foot-long baguette, and they feel deprived that they can't have it. So it just was so clear to me that help people to see where their feeling is coming from, and that it isn't coming from food, and it makes a difference, and it really does make a difference. I really could not tell you the hundreds of clients I've worked with, and quite often they'll come back to me after a little while and they say, well, it isn't working anymore. And I say, oh, what's the it? And they say, well, I was doing things differently, and now I'm not. And I say, right, okay, but they either are still losing weight, or they've got to the weight they want to get to and they're maintaining it. And they say, oh yeah, I'm not having a problem with my weight. I say, well, what's the it? And what happens is, because they've changed the way they think about food, they've changed their habits around food. So what they're doing becomes very normal, and it's not like a diet where they're struggling. And once you point that out to them, they're like, oh, because there's nothing they have to do. So it's a wonderful way to work with diets.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people think of changing diet as something that has to be hard.
Yes.
And I tried it a couple of times just for fun to see, okay, will this diet give me more energy?
Yes.
And so on. And it's always been a struggle. Um, but I was thinking about what, I guess there's a lot of people who want to lose weight who has some kind of problem with their body image, the image of the body.
Yep, that happens. That
Uh,
happens. Yep.
and how does that play in the way you work with people?
Well, a lot of people, if they go on a diet, especially if it's a very fast diet. So I've had quite a few people come to me over the years that have done diets that include just liquid and maybe a few bars.
Hmm.
So they're special, diets that you can, and it costs a lot of money for these things. And they lose weight very quickly. And then they're supposed to reintroduce food. And, when they reintroduce food, that's when the problems start, because then they go back to, as I say, their previous weight plus more. But because they've lost weight quickly, and because it hasn't actually been in their control, so they've been having what was given to them, the bars and the liquid, it's almost like the mind hasn't caught up with the body. So I had one lady in particular who wanted to lose stones for her wedding, and she did. So she lost all of this weight for her wedding day, and she bought the wedding dress in her new size, but that was all she bought in the new size, because she just didn't feel like it was really her. And when
Hmm.
she looked in the mirror, she didn't see her in her new size. It's almost like she just could not see what she was seeing in the mirror. She could only see her previous image. So, and what this particular woman did was went on her honeymoon and ate everything, and got to the size she was before, not just in the week's honeymoon, but gradually got back to the size she was before plus, and then of course was ready to start the whole process again. Fortunately, she didn't go back to the bars and the shakes. She came to me, and we were able to help her to see what foods were good for her. But it's not just the food. I mean, I am a nutritionist. I love raw food. You know, I know a lot about food, but the key point is really what's going on in the mind.
Hmm.
And what's going on for a lot of people is an ideal they have that they think they should match. And then when they don't match this ideal, they get disappointed with themselves, and then they start looking at their flaws and their faults, and everything that appears to be going wrong in their life.
Hmm. So as I was reading something about your website, the way you work. So is the work you do with people is the most important, is the key factor to help them lose weight or to be comfortable at where they are?
Yeah, I mean, I've got something that's starting again very soon called Freedom from Diets. So I'm all about, and my book on Kindle that I brought out in 2013, I think, is called Mindfulness with 2 L's, because everyone came to me with a mind full of diet information.
Yeah.
And I specifically wanted it to be a no diet book. So for me, it's never actually about the losing weight. That's what they want, and I'm here to help them to facilitate that. But it's about health. I'm all about health.
Mm.
So I have women come to me. I say women, I have a lot of men too. But for instance, I might have a woman come to me who's 23 stone, who wants to be 16 stone. And I might have someone else comes to me at 16 stone, because then they want to be 10 stone. So it's not ever the number on the scales that's important to me. It's how healthy they feel, what they're putting into their body. Because we know a calorie is a calorie. A calorie is it's a unit. But you could get, if you're going to have, I don't know, 15,000 calories a day or 2,000 calories a day, you could get your 2,000 calories from ice cream, but it's not going to help your body. So you could be sticking to your calorie intake, but it's not going to be healthy. Your body isn't going to get all of the things it needs in respect of vitamins, nutrients, enzymes, and everything else.
Mm.
So I'm more concerned with not how many calories you have, but where your calories are coming from for health. I don't know. I don't know how many calories are in a banana. Why would I care? you know. So as I say, the losing weight is someone's goal when they first come to me, but they very first soon see that it's health that I'm after, and that's everything. That's well-being. That's mental health, physical health.
Yeah, because I experience a lot of people, even though they get to a place where they are physical healthy because of their body weight and what they're eating, it
Yes.
doesn't necessarily mean that their mental health is also healthy.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. 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 Because you can be doing everything on the outside, as in eating, and which obviously helps the inside, and exercise and everything else. But if you've got a mind that's constantly stressed and worried, and you're constantly busy, 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 busy in your head, then you're still going to experience ill health. Mm.
Do you have some examples you can give on this topic, around this topic?
Yeah, yeah, lots of examples really, but I think more about what people think they experience when it comes to food and diet, because I get a lot of people that come to me with the same kind of issues. So they'll come to me with a lot of old beliefs and habits. So I don't know about where you live, but in England we were often, and I probably did it to my children when they were young, but we often have this thing like, finish everything on your plate, because, there are starving children somewhere. And I don't think there's a child alive that's ever thought, well, I don't understand how that bit of food's going to get to Africa, or India. But food, well, there's a lot of feeling around food, feeling of guilt, and now I've got to eat it because they're starving children, blah, blah. And people hold on to that. So people hold on to the beliefs that they should finish everything on their plate, for example.
Mm.
And that depends on whether they put the food on the plate or somebody else puts the food on the plate. And so I try and break down those old beliefs, let them go, because, it's not even a limiting belief, because a limiting belief is still made up. All the beliefs are just made up. They're just stories.
Mm.
They're not truth. So I try and help people see through the beliefs that they don't have to finish everything on their plate. Nothing terrible is going to happen to them. And I often say, if you really want to help starving children, then buy less food every week, because you don't need the amount you're eating, and do a standing order to a charity, do the extra money there. But so there are things like, I've got to finish everything on my plate. There are things like comfort food. That's a big one.
Mm.
Or I'm an emotional eater. People say that, I'm an emotional eater. And I say to them, do you eat when you're happy? And they say, oh, yes. I say, oh. So do you eat when you're peaceful? Yeah. Yes, because we're always experiencing an emotion. We can't not be an emotional eater. That's a bit like when people get hung up about the be present thing that we often talk about in the principles world. I had a client earlier today, and he was saying, well, I don't know how to be present. And I said, well, you're present now. Oh, you're still present. Oh, you're still here. It's not, we know that we're physically present, but it's the way we are going, time traveling in our mind, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. And this is what people do with food. They are not experiencing the food on their plate. They're experiencing a memory of the food on their plate quite often. They're time traveling, generally back in the past. Because back in the future, that would be good. So they're associating a feeling with the food. So they're associating, I had one client who, when she grew up, her mother was very, very busy. She was a businesswoman and very busy. But she always took the day off on my client's birthday when she was a child. And they baked cakes. It was their birthday tradition. And she associated a lot of love and attention with baking the cake, because that's what she got from her mother on that day. So when she was feeling low or stressed or anxious or unloved or whatever she was feeling in that moment, she looked at cakes. So she bought cake. So she went out and bought a big cake to make her feel better. But of course, it's nothing to do with the cake. It's to do with the memory of her mother and herself making and eating cakes. So, and the memory, she can access the memory at any time. She doesn't need a cake in front of her to do that. But that's what we do. We mistake the feeling as if it's coming from the food. Just in the same way we do with everything in life. We imagine that our feeling is coming from out there when we know it isn't. Well, that's what people do with food. They think it's going to give them something.
Hmm.
and it never can, because it's just food. I'm not saying, you know, I love good food. I love the food I like to eat. Why on earth would I eat things I don't like? So I encourage everybody to eat good food, not non-food. You know, I often say to people, there is no such thing as junk food. There is junk and there is food, and it is not the same.
How do you mean it's not the same?
Well, because if you go into a supermarket, there'll probably be maybe 3 aisles that contain food, and the rest is non-food. It's junk food. It's not. It's made in a lab. It comes from chemicals.
Okay.
It's not food. It's junk. But when people talk about junk food, no, it's not the same. And it's just junk.
So the principles we talk a lot about the inner wisdom, guidance, that there's something in us who knows what to do in every situation, something that guides us through life. And when we are present, it's easier to hear our inner wisdom than when there's a lot of mental noise. And how does that work around, or how is that around eating healthy?
Well, you know, I often say to clients, listen to your body and not to your mind. Don't listen to your thoughts, listen to your body, because your body will tell you what it needs. Now, if you're hungry, your body will tell you it needs food. It doesn't need a Mars bar or a bar of chocolate. That's your mind telling you that. Yeah, because your body will know it needs food. You know, I often say to people, years ago, if I was out, my mind might tell me another shot of tequila was a good idea. My body wouldn't. You know, so if you listen to your body, if you eat when you're hungry, for example. So what people do often, they eat at certain times. Now, I know if you're in a job that has, like if you're a teacher and you have a lunch break, then clearly you're likely to eat in your lunch break. But eat what you want to eat in your lunch break, not just because it's a lunch break. So if you're hungry, eat, and if you're not very hungry, then don't eat as much. But most people now, even if you're in an office, can have flexi working breaks, or you can eat at your desk, or so we don't always have to eat to a specific time. We don't have to eat just because it's lunchtime or because it's dinner time. We can listen to our body and eat when we're hungry. Now, a lot of people don't even know when they're hungry because they're so conditioned to eating at certain times. So if you're, or people will fear being hungry, so they'll eat in case they're hungry. So if you're in an office and you're having a meeting, if you're in a busy office and you've got a meeting at 11:30, people that generally have issues around food and diet and whatever will fear being hungry. So if their meeting is at 11:30, they might think, well, that meeting might go over lunchtime and I'll be hungry, so I'll eat now in case I get hungry. Well, they're not hungry at that moment, so why are they eating? Whereas somebody who doesn't think about food very much, I mean, enjoys the food they eat but doesn't have a lot of, doesn't give it a lot of headspace, it wouldn't occur to them to eat when they're not hungry in case they get hungry. And if the meeting went over lunchtime and they were hungry in the meeting, well, so what? Then they know they're not going to die. They know they're going to eat when they get out of the meeting. See?
They won't probably die in that hour. Sometimes I get confused because I really like food. I like to stuff things into my mouth for some reason.
Yes.
But I don't, sometimes I get confused is about, am I really hungry? Is my body needing anything? Or is it just my mind who plays a hungry trick on me?
Yes. Well, you'll know, and it's a common thing that if you think you're hungry but you're not sure, have a glass of water. And if you're still hungry, 15 minutes later, you're probably hungry if you don't actually know. But you see a lot of times as well that what people do is they eat because they're experiencing something else. So they could be bored. So if you're sitting and you've got to get on with something and you don't really want to get on with it, maybe it's a report to write and you've got to, but you don't really want to, and you might think, oh, I'll go and get something to eat as a distraction. Or if somebody has an argument, let's say they have an argument with I don't know, their partner, they might think they're going to eat something because to make them feel better. You see, well, that's got nothing to do with the body. That's all to do with the mind. They're imagining they're going to get a feeling from the food. So they're looking to feel better and they're going towards food. What happens is when they're thinking about the argument, they're really turned up and upset. And then they think, I'll go and get a biscuit or 6 biscuits. And then they let go of the thoughts about the argument to then think about the biscuits. And then they feel a bit better because they're not thinking about the argument. So they attribute the feeling better to the biscuits.
Yeah.
But then, of course, once they've eaten the biscuits, then they think about the argument again. And then they feel bad because they've eaten the biscuits, so they feel even worse. Yeah. So often we don't eat because we're hungry. We eat because we fancy something. And that's fine. We're humans. Of course we're going to do that. And that's fine. But it's when we attribute a feeling to the food that we can really eat when we don't need to, and possibly eat the wrong things. Because when somebody's upset, very rarely do they think, oh, I just need a bowl of curly kale. It's normally
yeah, that's actually funny that comfy food is always pizza, fries, snacks of some sort.
Yes, and there's lots of reasons for that. One is is, as I was just saying, when we associate a memory normally of a time when we felt good and we ate it. So the comfort we're looking for is not in the food, it's in the memory. But also, if we're looking at simple carbs, which is, fries and bread and so, pizza, whatever it would be, the simple carbs turn to sugar very quickly in our bloodstream. So then we experience a high. So then we think, oh, we feel better because of the food. But actually, it's just the sugar in the bloodstream. And then, of course, we get a crash. Yeah. Because it's, people say to me, oh, I'm addicted to carbs. And again, I say, well, how often do you think I could kill for a bowl of curly kale? And they're like, no. And I say, no, but that's because that's a carb, it's a complex carb. What you're looking for is a simple carb because you're looking for the sugar kick. That's all it is. That's all it is. But that when we think about something, I don't eat meat or fish now, but I can look at a plate of something that someone's eating, or an advert on TV, or a picture of something that's I don't know, something I used to eat, and I can remember enjoying it, and I can experience the pleasure of enjoying it, but I don't actually want to physically eat that now. But I can still remember what it was like to eat it and enjoy it, but I don't want to do it now. I can see that just because I've had the thought that I used to enjoy that, I don't need to follow the thought. It's just a thought.
I also heard that the biggest enjoyment of like eating something, it's not in the actual eating, it's the before eating, all the thinking about, oh, I'm gonna buy this, I'm gonna walk over to it, buy it, open it, and take a bite of it, and it will feel like this in my mouth.
Yes, which is why often when we eat something, it's never the way we imagine it's going to be. But that's because it's been proven that dopamine, our pleasure hormone, is activated at the thought of something and not when we're doing it. So there have been lots of studies where they can see that people eating chocolate, the thought of eating it, dopamine is released at the thought of eating it, but not as they eat it. And this is why as well that binge eaters often are just zoned out. They're almost like zombied as they're eating. They're not experiencing the food they eat at all. but they think they need it, often because they're not feeling very good. So they think they need it. They think about having it. They buy the food, and again, as you say, the pleasure, the anticipation is there, and then they eat it. They often eat very fast, and they eat it, and they're not experiencing what they're eating at all. So how can that actually be giving them pleasure? It can't.
But that's the thing about everything we do in life, or the chase we're doing. When I get this, oh, I have to get there, I have to achieve this, I have to eat this kind of food.
Yes.
And all because, oh, then I will have peace of mind, then I will be happy, then I will feel at ease in my body and in my mind.
Totally. If you look at any adverts for food, you know, I often say you never see an advert for Pringles, let's say, with, 20 stone people sitting there eating them. They're always young and wonderful and good looking, and, and every advert, as we know, sells a feeling. It doesn't sell a product, it sells a feeling. And if you look at the adverts for food, they are selling a feeling of, eating well equals success, or a feeling of comfort food, back at mum's. All of these things are always selling a feeling, and we buy into it. So then we think we're going to have the feeling when we buy the food, and then we're disappointed when we don't. So then we look for it somewhere else. So we keep looking outside because we keep looking for a feeling that we're not getting, and then because we're not getting satisfaction, because we think the satisfaction is going to come to us via a ready meal.
It's pretty insane.
Yeah. And there are lots of different things over the years I've had. I remember, I think this might be my book, that somebody years ago came to me because her husband, they hadn't been married very long, I think something like 6 months or so at the time, but they'd lived together for quite a few years before then. And they'd been very, very happy. But ever since they got married, she had just put lots and lots of weight on, and she was very unhappy. And so we talked about what she was eating, but actually, again, it's always to do with the way we're thinking about food. And in this particular case, what had happened was this woman had started a new job just after she got married. And the job that she was in an open plan office, and it was all women in the office, and they all got on very well. But what she hadn't noticed she was doing was she was in work, and the women were talking about their partners or their boyfriends and her husband sounds like a lovely man and clearly loved her to bits, but he wasn't the kind of person that would think about doing things. He was really happy to do with whatever she said. So she said, let's fly to Bangkok next week. He'd be like, yay, let's make it happen. But it wouldn't occur to him to suggest it. And this had suited them very well, because she liked coming up with plans, and he liked going along with the plans. But what happened when she was in this new office, the women that she was with were talking about, oh, my husband's surprised me, he's taking me away this weekend, or she'd go in on Monday and they'd be saying, oh, my husband took me here, and she started to think, why doesn't he do that? Why doesn't he take me there? Why doesn't he plan this? And every time that she thought that, she went straight for the vending machine and she bought chocolate and crisps. She was looking for her feeling of feeling better in the vending machine. But also her family had a history of diabetes, and she knew that her husband was very worried that she might get diabetes. So not only was she eating to feel better, she was eating to try and punish him, because it was like, look what you've done to me. And this poor man didn't know what was happening. He had no idea. And once we talked about it, and she realized that she was buying into the illusion of what life should be like, whereas actually she was very happy with her husband. When she realized she was buying into the illusion of she should be doing what everyone else was doing, and she was trying to punish him by hurting herself by eating. Had nothing to do with food, nothing at all to do with food. It was all to do with emotions and feelings and a misunderstanding of where she was going to get the feeling.
But it seems like that is the greatest, I don't know if you want to call it enemy, but the misunderstanding of how our mind works and
Yes.
where our feelings and experience of life comes from.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And even the misunderstanding when people have issues around food. You know, I use this example a lot, so forgive me if anyone's listening has heard it, but if somebody hasn't prepared, they want to, you know, lose weight, they want to be healthier, but they haven't prepared their breakfast, let's say, or they get up late and they don't have time to eat it, and they rush off out of the door to go to work, and they're hungry. So they stop at a shop and they pick up a sausage roll, let's say, for breakfast. Now, we know that's maybe not the best choice nutritionally, but it's just a sausage roll. But what they do is they make that sausage roll mean today is a bad day. So every other food decision they make during the day is a bad one, because after all, it's a bad day. And I'll start again tomorrow.
Mm.
It's just a
Mm.
sausage roll, full stop, you know? So I often say to people, I want them to have a bit more so what in their life. You know, I had a sausage roll, so what? It doesn't mean to say I have to have something unhealthy for lunch. It's so what? But what people do is they eat the sausage roll, then they beat themselves up because they've eaten the sausage roll. So then they feel really bad. And what is their go-to to feel better? Chocolate crisps, whatever it would be.
Mm.
So they're feeling bad because they've eaten the sausage roll. So then they go and get something else that's not healthy to feel better, which of course doesn't make them feel better, because then they've added that to the list of things they wish they hadn't eaten. And then that's how the day goes on. Whereas, you know, they had a sausage roll, so what? It's not going to kill you, you know. Whereas if we do something, if we make people say things, oh well, you know, I fell off the diet. How can you fall off a diet? It's not a thing. It's not a skateboard. What do you mean you fell off it, you know? And I think the more that we see it for what it is, you ate a sausage roll, so what? You know, and let go of all the feelings that go with it, all the feelings that are produced by our thoughts about ourselves because we've eaten a sausage roll. The sausage roll doesn't care, couldn't care less. Doesn't care if you eat it or not.
Oh, we actually don't know. Maybe it
I'm guessing.
has.
I'm guessing, eat me.
So if there, do you have some, is there some underlying principles around weight loss and being healthy, both mentally and physical? Do you have some underlying principles?
So when you say principles, you mean principles not as in 3 principles, just general principles?
Yeah, general principles.
Yeah, well, you know, I worked with Paul McKenna many years ago on his I Can Make You Thin. I don't know if you know Paul McKenna, and Michael Neal worked with Paul McKenna.
Yeah.
Michael Neal was one of my first NLP coaches. And the kind of things that Paul used to talk about then would make absolute sense. You know, eat slowly, because we eat way too fast, and then we eat way too much because we're eating way too fast. So just go slowly. Just go slowly. Be present to your food, because people say, how can I not be present to my food? It's here, it's on my fork. But we're not thinking about the food. You're thinking about what you've got to do next, or what you did yesterday, or watching TV. So be present to your food. And then you can listen to your body. You know when you're feeling full. There are so many signals the body gives you. You know, the food doesn't taste the same as it goes on. When you've had enough, the food doesn't taste the same. So effectively, we're at the end of the meal, we could be eating the memory of the first bite.
Mm.
Now, you know, if you eat slowly, you can recognize the food isn't tasting the same. When you're full, another reason for that is because when your body has enough of what it needs, which is why you can never eat too much junk food, because your body is never getting the nutrients and enzymes it needs. But when you eat real food and your body is satisfied, then the message goes to the brain sends the message to the taste buds, and they close effectively. They close. So it doesn't taste of anything. Now, there are physical reasons to eating slowly, as well as being present to your food and letting your mind be on what you're eating. So eat when you're hungry. And see, instead of eating at a certain time, or just because you should, or just because you think it's time, eat when you're hungry. Yeah, and eat real food when you're hungry. I often have people that come to me who drive in their job, so they may drive quite a long way, and they say things like, "Oh, it's it's so difficult because when I stop for petrol, when I fill up my car, I buy chocolate." And I say, "Okay, why do you buy chocolate?" And they say, "Well, I'm hungry." Now, I don't know about where you live, but in England now, almost every service station on a motorway and almost every garage, just normal service stations, have shops attached. So you could actually buy food. So I say to them, well, why don't you buy some salmon, cooked salmon, or a chicken leg or something? And they say, oh, I can't eat that. And I say, why not? And they say, well, because it's not lunchtime. So it's okay to eat a triple Mars bar because, the calories in that are different. You can eat those calories when it's not lunchtime.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
crazy. Yeah, but that's just because that's a habit of thinking. That's a habit of thinking. So there are things, as I say, like eat slowly, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're full. Stop when you're full rather than continuing. Because, clients will say to me, oh, I have to finish it. And I say, why? And they say, because it tastes so nice. But that's back to what we were just talking about, that actually it doesn't, the food doesn't get better the more you eat. If you like chocolate and I gave you a chocolate, I often use Ferrero Rocher or something like that as an example, and I gave you one of those and you enjoyed it, and I gave you another, and I gave you another, how would you feel by the 20th?
I would probably be sick.
Yes. So it wouldn't get better, would it, the more you had?
Not at all.
No. And nor does any food. It doesn't get better the more you have. You just have more of it. So the practical things like those three things are standard, really. But it's looking at why you think you can't do those things. So it's looking at the thought process that goes along with it. And that is the key. That is the key. That's why this understanding makes all the difference. This understanding means that people do not have to be on a diet ever again. If you cut out the feelings, feelings, food is not going to give you a feeling. It's impossible. I'm not saying you won't enjoy it. I want everyone to enjoy their food, but it's not going to give you a feeling. It's not going to make you happy if you're unhappy.
Yeah, and as you said, our body we have a system that will tell us when enough is enough, when you shouldn't eat any more chocolate.
Yes.
But one of the big things I hear you say is, if you are watching television while you're eating, your mind is somewhere else, and it will be harder for you to hear what your body mind is telling you, because you're not present with the food you're stuffing into your mouth and your body.
Yes.
So you can't really feel what is going on when your mind is watching something and is totally absorbed in the TV show or the movie.
Yes, absolutely. There was an experiment in Sweden years ago, and then Paul McKenna replicated it and used to show a video of some, I think there were maybe, 6 people that were told not to eat from a certain time. I can't remember what time it was, but certain time in the afternoon. And they were picked up the next morning and taken off to an all-day cafe. And they all had a traditional English breakfast, which is, everything, sausage and eggs and beans. And they all ate it. They all loved it. They really enjoyed it. And they said how tasty it was. And so they were asked to do the same thing. So again, from a certain point that day, they couldn't eat anything. And then the next day they were picked up in the morning and taken to the same place. So they had the anticipation as well of what they were going to eat, because they'd eaten this and they knew they liked it. So they anticipated it. And but when they got there, they were blindfolded. Now, when they were blindfolded, they didn't know, because they couldn't see their plate, they didn't know if they needed to chop or scoop So they had to go very slowly because they had to just go and guess what they were eating. And because they couldn't see what was on their plate, they had to listen to their body to tell them when they'd had enough. And nobody finished their food. Not one person finished everything on the plate. Because the feeling of finishing everything on the plate when you can see the food is coming from your thoughts about finishing everything on the plate, not coming from what your body needs. So
That's pretty cool.
We're often eating from our head and not from our body. We eat what we think we're going to get a feeling from, and we eat the amounts that we think we should have. When I say to people, when they tell me the portion size and I suggest they cut it down a bit, they often say things like, well, I'll look at that food on the plate and it won't fill me up. Now, they're sitting with me, so they're not looking at food on their plate, they're imagining the food on their plate, and then they're imagining that that isn't going to fill them up. Well, that's totally made up, isn't it? Because they're not even sitting there in front of the food. But, and I say to them, well, try it and see. Because fortunately, we are very lucky. We live in a country where there is always going to be food. So it's not as if you don't have enough on your plate, that's it forever. You can just go and get some more if you really need to. But when you, as I say, listen to your body and not what you think you should have. Yeah? I had a client years ago who had a string of restaurants in London, and he was telling me how they made the plates bigger and bigger and bigger because they could make the meals bigger. Like they could encourage people to buy a very big steak, for example. And if they put that very large steak for a lot of money onto a normal plate, people wouldn't be able, they'd look at it and think, oh my gosh, that's too big, I can't eat that. So what they did is they made the plate very big so the steak looked in proportion. And then they could sell people way more meat than they ever need in one sitting for an extortionate amount of money. But we think that's going to be good. And then we start eating something and then we think we should finish it because we've paid for it. Well, as I said, that's got nothing to do with the food. That's all coming from our thought process in the moment.
Oh no, my computer.
Bless you.
Oh, the computer's shutting down for some reason. See if I can power it up again.
Oh, you're back again.
Am I back again?
Yeah, back again.
Okay.
Brilliant. Like all of us, huh?
Like all of us. Yeah. I think I don't know if I got everything you said.
That's okay. It wouldn't have been that important.
Oh, great. But there's at least one thing I have left. And do you have to go somewhere at a certain time?
No, I won't be able to be too long because I've got to grab something to eat. But I've got something at 2, so yeah. But I'm okay for a few minutes more. That's
okay,
fine.
cool. Because I heard of I don't know if you can call it a study, but it was around eating, and they took a bunch of kids. I think they were around 3 years old.
Yes.
Oh, you know it.
Yeah, that's an old study. Yeah, but about where the children went to instinctively. So first they went for sweets.
Yeah.
And sweet things, yeah, and then they went to what their body wants. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's pretty interesting because I think most parents and other people, I guess, will think that kids will have to be controlled.
Yes.
In order to eat healthy food because they will reach for biscuits and candy and sweet things like that.
Yes. Yeah. The thing is, we are born to appreciate a sweetness. There's a sweetness, a natural sweetness in a mother's milk that attracts the baby back to the milk. But this is a natural. There's a big difference between natural sugars and artificial sugars. And so what happens is then we start to call artificial sugar a treat for children. So we start to give them treats or then deny them treats, and the children then start to see it as a treat. Now, because sugar is incredibly addictive, it's like crack cocaine to the brain. It's incredibly addictive. So we want more of it. You know, it's understandable. I mean, nobody can ever eat, well, maybe there's certain people out there that are very good, but not many people can eat one biscuit or have one square of chocolate from a commercial bar of chocolate, because it's designed for us not to. It's designed for us not to feel the satisfaction we think we're going to get for the body. So therefore we have to keep eating more and more and more of it. Now, artificial sugar goes straight through the stomach wall into the bloodstream. It doesn't go through the digestive tract, straight through the stomach wall into the bloodstream. Then we flood with insulin that strips the sugar out of the bloodstream before it does damage. And then we get that high. And then, of course, we get the crash. And then we think, oh, I'm feeling a bit low now or a bit tired. I'll have another biscuit. And the cycle goes on. Now, a natural sugar will go through the bloodstream, through the digestive system. And if you look at fructose, it takes a long time to become glycose before it becomes glucose. So even though it goes through the system quite quickly, the process to turn it into glucose is quite slow, and it keeps our blood sugar level stable. Okay, so, but what happens is, instead of giving the children something like a piece of fruit, people give them a piece of chocolate as a treat, and then we grow up thinking that a treat is something artificially sweet. So then if we don't give ourselves a treat, we feel deprived. And then when we feel deprived, we want the thing more, you see? So I think it's really important, where children are concerned, to not give them the old labels and beliefs that we associate with food and with treats. Because children, as you say, instinctively will go for what they need, what they want.
Yeah. Okay, I like that one. I like it. Well, I don't have anything else to ask about.
Okay.
So,
Well, as I say, you know, I really can. You could just wind me up and set me off, and I could go for hours on this. So you don't really want that.
I will stop right here.
Okay. I do think, as I say, I think that to look at the thought process behind why we eat what we eat is really important. And, you know, if we think that people think that it's easier to go and get a McDonald's than to put something in the oven. It isn't. You know, that's a thought process again, where we're associating something with that food that's not with that food. And so, as I say, I think the big thing as well is to remember there is no junk food. So eat real food. People don't generally eat way too much of real food because they feel satisfied.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
Thank you for joining me, Elaine.
It's a pleasure. Okay, it's been lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. And I will stop there. Yeah, and I want to say, for the record, that people listening to this, I will put a link to Elena's website. So if you want to get in touch with her and hear more about this stuff, you can do that through the link.
Thank you.